Lauren Taylor never mailed postcards while she was still enjoying a trip. She bought them early, usually on the first day, and carried them in her purse until the vacation was nearly over. Only then would she sit at a motel desk, campground table, or roadside restaurant and write about the moments she wanted to remember. Her husband, Michael Williams, used to tease her about it. "You're reporting from a place you haven't left yet," he once told her. Lauren replied that memories became clearer when the ending was close. During the final evening of their Tennessee vacation in September 1996, Lauren began writing a postcard to her younger sister. The front showed a photograph of mist-covered mountains. On the back, Lauren wrote, "Michael says the rain will pass by morning. We found a quiet trail for tomorrow, and then we're heading home. This place is beautiful, but at night it feels like the woods go on forever." The unfinished postcard was later found inside the couple's tent. Michael and Lauren were never seen by their families again. Their car remained at the campground. Their clothing, wallets, and travel plans suggested they intended to return to Alabama within 2 days. Nothing indicated that they had abandoned their lives voluntarily. Search teams spent weeks examining trails, rivers, caves, and mountain roads. They found no bodies. They found no convincing sign of an accident. For 13 years, the disappearance remained an open wound for 2 families and an unresolved mystery in a rural Tennessee community. Then, in October 2009, a farmer named Earl Benton walked behind a recently purchased property with his dog, Roscoe. The dog stopped near an abandoned barn and began digging beneath a patch of loose earth. Earl tried to pull him away. Roscoe refused. A few minutes later, the dog uncovered a piece of faded blue fabric wrapped around something pale and curved. It was a human bone. Beneath the soil were the remains of Michael Williams and Lauren Taylor. They had been buried together on land once maintained by a man who had been questioned during the original investigation. A man who had appeared at their campground hours before they vanished. A man who told police he had never spoken to them. And a man who had spent 13 years believing the farm would keep his secret. Michael Williams was born in Montgomery, Alabama, in 1963. His father worked for the city water department, and his mother managed the office of a small insurance agency. Michael was the oldest of 4 children. He was practical, patient, and difficult to impress. He rarely bought anything without comparing prices, and he believed most household problems could be repaired with enough time and the correct tool. By 1996, Michael worked as an industrial electrician at a manufacturing plant outside Birmingham. Co-workers described him as reliable and cautious. He volunteered for overtime but disliked taking unnecessary risks. When machinery failed, Michael was the person supervisors called before shutting down an entire production line. He did not panic easily. Lauren Taylor grew up in Mobile. She was 3 years younger than Michael and worked as a dental hygienist. Friends remembered her as attentive, humorous, and unusually good at making nervous patients relax. Lauren remembered birthdays and carried small gifts in her car in case she forgot to mail them. She took photographs of ordinary things: hotel signs, diner menus, weathered barns, and Michael sleeping in the passenger seat during long drives. The couple met in 1988 at a wedding in Tuscaloosa. Michael was a friend of the groom. Lauren knew the bride from college. They were seated at the same table after another guest changed places. Michael later said Lauren spoke to him for 20 minutes before he realized she was flirting. They married in 1991. The ceremony was small and held at Lauren's parents' church in Mobile. Afterward, they moved into a 1-story brick house near Birmingham. They had no children. Both wanted a family. But after several years of medical appointments and unsuccessful treatments, they stopped discussing the subject openly. Lauren's sister, Melissa, said the disappointment brought them closer in some ways and made certain social occasions more difficult in others. They avoided large baby showers. They spent more time traveling. Camping became one of the ways they escaped the questions people asked without realizing they were painful. Michael handled the practical side of each trip. He checked the vehicle, packed tools, studied maps, and watched weather forecasts. Lauren chose the destination, bought postcards, and kept a handwritten journal. They preferred established campgrounds with marked trails. Neither was an extreme outdoors enthusiast. They did not climb cliffs, enter caves, or hike far from maintained paths. Their Tennessee vacation was intended to be quiet and uncomplicated. That was what made their disappearance so difficult to understand. Michael and Lauren left Birmingham on September 13, 1996, in Michael's dark red 1992 Ford Explorer. They packed a small tent, 2 sleeping bags, cooking supplies, rain jackets, a first aid kit, and food for 5 days. Michael carried a compass and a topographic map. Lauren brought a compact 35mm camera and several rolls of film. Their destination was the fictional community of Pine Haven, Tennessee, located near the Cumberland Plateau. The region contained dense hardwood forest, narrow ridges, waterfalls, abandoned logging roads, and scattered farms. Tourists visited during autumn, but Pine Haven never received the crowds associated with larger national parks. The town had 1 grocery store, 2 gas stations, a diner, a sheriff's substation, and several churches. A county campground called Laurel Creek sat 7 miles outside town. It contained 32 campsites beside a shallow river. Michael had found the campground in a travel guide. The description promised quiet trails and limited development. The couple arrived shortly before 5 p.m. The campground manager, Nora Bishop, assigned them Site 117. She remembered Lauren asking whether bears entered the campground. Nora said black bears occasionally passed through the surrounding forest, but avoided occupied sites. Michael asked about recent rain and trail conditions. Nora warned him that several unmarked logging routes crossed the eastern side of the county property. She told them to remain on the maintained trails. The first 2 days passed normally. Michael and Lauren hiked to a waterfall, ate breakfast at Pine Haven Diner, and purchased supplies at a local grocery store. Lauren mailed 3 postcards but kept 1 for Melissa. She had not yet decided how to describe the trip. On September 15, the couple visited a scenic overlook called Mercer Ridge. Another tourist took a photograph of them standing beside the Explorer. Michael wore jeans and a green flannel shirt. Lauren wore a blue denim jacket over a white sweater. They stood close together, smiling toward the camera. It became the final confirmed photograph of the couple. On the afternoon of September 16, a maintenance worker reported seeing an unfamiliar green van parked near the campground's service road. The vehicle was an older Dodge, with a white primer patch above 1 rear wheel. A man stood beside it, smoking a cigarette. The maintenance worker asked whether he needed assistance. The man said he was waiting for friends. He left several minutes later. Nora Bishop recognized the van. It belonged to Calvin Rusk. Rusk was 39 years old and lived intermittently in Pine Haven. He repaired farm equipment, cut firewood, and accepted temporary labor wherever he could find it. Several years earlier, he had worked as a caretaker on an abandoned property known as the Morrow Farm. The farm sat approximately 9 miles from Laurel Creek Campground. Its original owner had died, and the buildings remained unused while the estate moved through legal disputes. Rusk had been allowed to live in a small house behind the barn in exchange for watching the property. He lost that arrangement after equipment and fuel disappeared. Nothing was ever proven, but the owner's family believed Rusk was responsible. In 1994, he received probation for assaulting a woman outside a bar. A second complaint involving another woman was dropped when she declined to testify. People in Pine Haven considered Rusk unpleasant and unpredictable, but not necessarily dangerous. He knew the forest roads better than most residents. He hunted, trapped animals, and entered abandoned properties without permission. Nora had banned him from the campground after he disturbed guests the previous year. When she learned his van had been seen near the service road, she drove through the campsites looking for him. He was gone. At approximately 6:30 that evening, Lauren and Michael ate at Pine Haven Diner. A waitress named Kathy Doyle remembered them because Lauren asked for a clean spoon after finding dried food on the first one. Michael apologized for the request even though he had not made it. The couple discussed hiking a short trail the next morning, before beginning the drive home. Kathy also remembered a man sitting alone at the counter. He wore a gray work shirt and a dark cap. He watched the couple several times through the mirror behind the counter. Kathy later identified the man as Calvin Rusk. She did not see him speak to Michael or Lauren. Rusk paid in cash and left shortly before them. The couple returned to Laurel Creek around 8 p.m. A family camping nearby heard Michael and Lauren talking quietly beside a fire. At approximately 9:15, Lauren walked to the campground restroom. She returned carrying a flashlight. The neighboring campers went inside their trailer shortly before 10. They heard a vehicle moving slowly through the campground about 30 minutes later. No one looked outside. At 7:20 a.m. on September 17, Nora Bishop drove past Site 17. The Explorer was still parked beside the tent. The campsite appeared quiet. She assumed Michael and Lauren were sleeping. At 10 o'clock, the tent remained closed. This seemed unusual because the couple had risen early on previous mornings. Nora stopped and called their names. There was no answer. The tent flap was partly open. Inside, she found the sleeping bags folded near one wall. The bedrolls did not appear to have been used during the night. Lauren's purse was beneath a jacket. Michael's wallet sat inside a duffel bag. Their clothing, toiletries, and road maps remained at the site. The unfinished postcard lay on top of Lauren's journal. Michael's car keys were missing. So were Lauren's camera, the flashlight, and both pairs of hiking boots. The Explorer was unlocked. The passenger seat had been pushed farther back than Lauren normally kept it. A paper cup from Pine Haven Diner rested in the center console. There were no obvious signs of struggle. No blood was visible. Nothing valuable appeared to have been stolen. Nora contacted the sheriff's office. Deputy Frank Ellis arrived at 10:42. He examined the campsite and questioned nearby guests. At first, investigators believed Michael and Lauren had gone for an early walk, but they had left their map and water containers behind. The couple's food remained untouched. The weather had turned warm, and neither had taken a jacket. By early afternoon, deputies organized a search. Tracking dogs followed a scent from Site 17 to the campground road. Near the entrance, the trail became confused by vehicle traffic. One dog repeatedly moved toward a gravel service area where the green van had been seen the previous day. No useful tire impression remained. Rain earlier in the week had softened the ground, but dozens of vehicles had crossed it. The search expanded into the woods. Teams followed the nearest trails, checked the river, and inspected steep slopes. They found no footprints that could be conclusively connected to the couple. By sunset, Michael and Lauren were officially listed as missing. Investigators initially considered the possibility that the couple had become lost. Perhaps they left the campground before dawn and entered the forest without supplies. But the missing car keys complicated that theory. If Michael intended to walk from the campsite, why carry the keys while leaving the vehicle behind? One explanation was that someone had invited them into another vehicle. Michael may have locked or planned to move his own vehicle later. Another possibility was that the keys had been taken during the disappearance. The missing camera also suggested Lauren expected to take photographs. She may have willingly entered a vehicle to visit a nearby viewpoint or farm. Deputies questioned campground guests and local residents. A delivery driver reported seeing a dark red Explorer parked at Laurel Creek after 7 a.m. No one saw Michael or Lauren on the roads. No purchases were made using their credit cards. Neither contacted family. Melissa Taylor received no postcard or telephone call. The couple had planned to return to Alabama on September 19. When they failed to appear, both families traveled to Tennessee. Michael's older brother, Stephen, immediately focused on the abandoned Explorer. He said Michael would never leave his wallet behind unless he expected to return within minutes. Lauren's mother pointed to the unfinished postcard. Lauren always completed them before mailing them. To her family, the interrupted sentence suggested the couple had not chosen to leave. Deputies interviewed Calvin Rusk on September 19. He admitted being near Laurel Creek, but said he had stopped only to repair a loose battery cable. He denied entering the campground. He also denied seeing Michael and Lauren. Rusk claimed he spent the night of September 16th at the home of a woman named Darlene Pierce. Darlene confirmed that he arrived shortly before midnight and remained until morning. She could not account for his whereabouts before 11:30 p.m. Rusk's van was examined. The interior contained tools, rope, blankets, fuel cans, and animal traps. Nothing immediately connected it to the missing couple. The white primer patch matched the vehicle described by witnesses, but Rusk had never denied owning it. Deputies found reddish-brown stains on a floor mat. Testing identified animal blood. Rusk said he had transported a wounded deer. The claim was plausible. His tires were common all-terrain models and could not be matched to impressions near the campground. Without evidence of a crime, police could not hold him. Rusk became angry during questioning. He accused the sheriff's department of targeting him because local residents disliked him. He left Pine Haven several days later. Darlene said he told her he had found work in Kentucky. The van was later sold to a scrapyard. By the time investigators attempted to examine it again, it had been crushed. Rusk remained a person of interest, but the case did not move forward. The official search continued for nearly 3 weeks. More than 200 volunteers participated. They searched Laurel Creek, surrounding trails, abandoned logging roads, and several caves. Divers examined deep pools in the river. Aircraft flew over ridges and farmland. Search dogs were taken to sites where Rusk had worked. One of those locations was the Morrow Farm. At the time, detectives considered it only one of several abandoned properties he knew. The farm's front fields were inspected from the road. The main house was locked. The barn appeared unstable. Investigators did not obtain a warrant to dig or enter because they lacked evidence connecting the property to Michael and Lauren. The area behind the barn was covered with brush, old machinery, and piles of discarded lumber. No one searched beneath the soil. The families printed thousands of flyers. The couple's photograph appeared in newspapers across Tennessee and Alabama. Several witnesses reported seeing them. A motel clerk in Kentucky believed they rented a room. A truck driver said he saw Lauren at a rest stop with an older man. A woman in Georgia claimed Michael had asked for directions. None of the sightings could be verified. In October, hunters found a denim jacket near a remote trail. Lauren's family said it was not hers. In November, a human bone was recovered near a riverbank. It was later identified as archaeological and more than a century old. Each discovery renewed hope and then removed it. As winter approached, the organized searches ended. Michael Williams and Lauren Taylor remained missing. Investigators later reconstructed a likely sequence based on evidence recovered in 2009. Calvin Rusk returned to the campground late on September 16th. He may have approached Michael and Lauren while they sat near the fire. Rusk knew local back roads and abandoned viewpoints. He may have told them about a place where they could photograph the mountains at sunrise. Lauren's missing camera supported the possibility that she intended to see something scenic. Michael may have distrusted Rusk. But Rusk was local, familiar to the campground manager, and able to present himself as a guide or repairman. The couple may have agreed to follow him only a short distance. Their hiking boots and flashlight were missing. Their water, jackets, and map remained behind. This suggests they expected to return quickly. Rusk may have told them the location was only a few minutes away. The couple likely entered his van voluntarily. Michael carried the explorer's keys, perhaps because he locked the vehicle before leaving. The van then traveled toward the Morrow farm. What happened after they arrived was never fully established. Prosecutors later argued that Rusk intended to rob them and assault Lauren. He may have believed tourists carried cash. He may also have seen the couple as vulnerable because they were far from home and unknown in the community. Evidence showed there was a confrontation inside or near the barn. Michael's blood was found years later on a rusted metal support. Lauren's damaged camera was discovered beneath floorboards. The film had been removed. Rusk used violence to control them. By sunrise, both were dead. He buried them in a shallow grave behind the barn, covered the area with soil, rocks, and discarded lumber, and returned to Darlene's house before midnight or shortly afterward. The timeline remained uncertain. Darlene may have been mistaken about his arrival. She may also have lied because she feared him. The disappearance altered both families. Michael's parents maintained the same telephone number in case he called. His father refused to sell an old fishing boat they had planned to repair together. Lauren's mother kept copies of every missing person flyer. Melissa completed the unfinished postcard in her mind many times, but never wrote on it. She stored it inside a plastic sleeve. In 1998, a private investigator hired by the families re-examined Calvin Rusk. Rusk was living in Missouri and working at a salvage yard. He denied involvement. The investigator discovered that Rusk had been arrested in 1997 for attempting to force a woman into his van outside a roadside bar. The charge was reduced after the woman declined to continue cooperating. In 2001, he was convicted in Arkansas of kidnapping and assaulting another woman. She survived after escaping from a locked utility shed. Rusk received a 12-year prison sentence. The details disturbed the Tennessee investigators. The surviving woman said Rusk had offered her a ride, driven to an isolated property, and attacked her after she tried to leave. The behavior resembled the theory surrounding Michael and Lauren. Still, similarity was not proof. No physical evidence connected him to the 1996 disappearance. Detectives interviewed him in prison. Rusk laughed when shown the couple's photograph. He said, "You people still haven't found them because they aren't where you're looking." Investigators interpreted the statement as arrogance rather than confession. He refused further questions. The Morrow farm remained abandoned. Ownership became entangled in unpaid taxes and estate disputes. The roof of the house collapsed. Trees grew through old fences. The barn leaned farther each year. No one lived there long enough to notice the ground behind it. In 2008, Earl Benton purchased the Morrow property at a county tax sale. Earl was 62 years old and had raised cattle most of his life. He intended to clear the land, repair the barn, and use the lower pasture for hay. His wife thought the property was too damaged. Earl believed the soil was worth the trouble. He moved equipment onto the farm in the spring of 2009. The work progressed slowly. The barn contained rotting boards, broken tools, and piles of metal left by previous occupants. Behind it was a raised patch of ground beneath several cedar trees. Earl assumed it was debris from an old foundation. His dog Roscoe often followed him around the property. Roscoe was a 5-year-old mixed breed with a habit of digging after moles. On October 8, Earl was clearing brush near the barn when Roscoe began scratching at the raised ground. Earl called him away. The dog returned minutes later. By the third time, Roscoe had uncovered a strip of blue material. Earl thought it was part of a tarp. He pulled at it and felt resistance. The fabric was wrapped around a pale object. At first, Earl believed it was an animal bone. Then he saw what appeared to be part of a sleeve and several small metal buttons. He stopped digging and contacted the sheriff's office. Deputy Megan Price arrived at 3:18 p.m. She examined the exposed bone and immediately secured the area. A forensic anthropologist confirmed it was human. The farm became a crime scene. Excavation began the following morning. The grave was approximately 4 feet deep and located 17 yards behind the barn. 2 skeletons had been placed close together. The bodies were wrapped partly in blankets and partly in clothing. The blue fabric Roscoe uncovered belonged to Lauren's denim jacket. A gold wedding band was found near one hand. The interior engraving read M&L 51891. Dental records confirmed Lauren's identity. The second skeleton belonged to Michael. His wallet had been removed, but a metalwork identification tag remained attached to a keychain. The remains showed evidence of violence. Michael had suffered a fatal injury to the skull. Lauren's neck bones and surrounding evidence suggested strangulation, though the medical examiner could not determine the exact mechanism after 13 years. Neither death was accidental. The grave also contained several personal items: Michael's missing car keys, Lauren's compact camera, a broken flashlight, a silver bracelet Lauren frequently wore, a length of green nylon rope, 2 buttons from a gray work shirt. The shirt buttons were later matched to clothing manufactured for a regional farm supply company where Calvin Rusk had worked in 1996. The match was not unique, but it was significant. More important evidence was found inside the barn. Beneath loose boards, investigators discovered the missing roll of film from Lauren's camera. The metal canister had corroded, but portions of the film remained intact. Technicians recovered only 3 partial images. One showed the campground fire. Another showed Michael standing beside the tent. The final image was blurred and dark. It appeared to have been taken inside a vehicle. Michael's face was visible near the left edge. Behind him was a section of green-painted metal and a white primer patch. It matched the interior and exterior colors described on Rusk's van. The photograph did not show Rusk, but it placed the couple inside or immediately beside a vehicle matching his. Forensic teams dismantled parts of the abandoned barn. On a rusted support post, they found a dark stain protected beneath a layer of old grease. Modern DNA testing identified the blood as Michael's. A second stain on a wooden wall belonged to Lauren. Near the rear entrance, investigators recovered a cigarette filter trapped beneath concrete. The filter was badly degraded. A partial DNA profile was obtained. It was consistent with Calvin Rusk and statistically unlikely to belong to an unrelated person. Rusk had worked at the farm, so his DNA there did not prove murder by itself. However, the filter appeared to date from the period when the concrete patch was placed over disturbed flooring. Invoices showed Rusk purchased cement 2 days after the couple vanished. He had told police he was in Kentucky by then. Employment records contradicted him. A hardware store clerk remembered Rusk buying lime, rope, and 2 bags of quick-setting concrete. The clerk had not connected the purchase to the disappearance in 1996. Investigators also found one of Lauren's earrings inside an old drain beneath the barn floor. The matching earring appeared in photographs taken during the trip. The cumulative evidence established that Michael and Lauren had been at the Morrow farm. It also placed Rusk there during the relevant period. Detectives traveled to Arkansas to interview him again. This time, they brought photographs of the grave, the camera, and the recovered evidence. Rusk stared at the image of the wedding ring for several seconds. Then he said, "You found the wrong place." Detectives had not told him the bodies were found behind the barn rather than inside it. His statement suggested knowledge of the location. He refused to explain. Darlene Pierce was re-interviewed in November 2009. She had moved to another county and had not spoken with Rusk for years. During the original investigation, Darlene said Rusk arrived at her home before midnight on September 16. In 2009, she changed her account. Rusk arrived shortly before sunrise on September 17. He was wearing different clothes from the ones he had worn earlier. His hands were scratched. There was mud on his boots and dried blood near one cuff. Rusk told her he had struck a deer. He ordered her to wash the clothes. Darlene placed them in a plastic bag, but did not wash them immediately. The following day, Rusk took the bag and burned it behind his trailer. He threatened Darlene after she asked why. She lied in 1996 because Rusk had previously broken her jaw. She believed he would kill her if she contradicted him. Darlene also remembered seeing a woman's silver bracelet inside the van several days later. Rusk said he found it at a campground. The bracelet recovered from the grave matched Lauren's. Darlene's testimony explained Rusk's false alibi and strengthened the timeline. Another witness came forward after the discovery. A former farmhand named Walter Keene said Rusk asked him in late September 1996 how long buried animals took to decompose. Walter assumed he was discussing livestock. Rusk also warned him to stay away from the Morrow farm because the barn was unstable. Walter never reported the conversation. Calvin Rusk was nearing the end of his Arkansas sentence when Tennessee authorities charged him with 2 counts of first-degree murder and 2 counts of kidnapping. He was transferred to Pinehave in January 2010. The community reaction was divided. Some older residents remembered Rusk as violent and believed he had always been capable of murder. Others insisted the evidence was circumstantial. Rusk's defense argued that he had worked at the farm for years, explaining his DNA, cigarette filter, and clothing buttons. They claimed another person could have used the property after he left. They suggested Michael and Lauren met an unknown offender at the campground, who later buried them on land associated with Rusk to frame him. Prosecutors responded that no unknown offender had access to Rusk's van, knew the farm, possessed Lauren's bracelet, purchased concrete after the disappearance, and returned home with blood on his clothing. Rusk continued denying involvement. He claimed he had never met Michael or Lauren. The recovered film undermined that statement. Experts compared the van visible in the final photograph with historical images of Rusk's vehicle. The green paint tone, window frame, primer location, and interior panel shape were consistent. The image could not identify the driver. It showed that at least one victim entered the van. The trial began in April 2011. Michael's and Lauren's families filled several rows of the courtroom. The prosecution presented the case as a planned act of predation rather than a spontaneous confrontation. Rusk observed the couple at the diner and campground. He approached them with a false offer to show them a scenic location. Because Lauren carried her camera and Michael carried the car keys, they likely believed they would be gone only briefly. Rusk drove them to the Morrow farm. Once there, he attempted to rob them and isolate Lauren. Michael resisted. Rusk killed him first. Lauren fought and was killed afterward. The prosecutor avoided claiming an exact sequence that the evidence could not prove. There were no surviving witnesses. No confession existed. The case depended on location, behavior, forensic evidence, and Rusk's lies. Darlene Pierce testified about his arrival, injuries, burned clothing, and threats. Her voice shook throughout the examination. The defense questioned why she had waited 13 years. Darlene answered, "Because I thought silence kept me alive." Then they found 2 people whose silence had been forced on them. Earl Benton described Roscoe uncovering the fabric. He said he initially believed the dog had found an old animal grave. Michael's brother identified the engraved wedding band. Melissa Taylor identified Lauren's bracelet and denim jacket. A forensic analyst presented the restored photograph from the van. The image was grainy. Michael's face was only partly visible, but the green metal and white primer patch appeared behind him. The photograph had been taken during the final hours of his life. The most emotionally difficult evidence was Lauren's unfinished postcard. Prosecutors used it to show the couple planned to return home. The defense objected that it was sentimental and irrelevant. The judge allowed a limited portion. Melissa read the sentence aloud. "We found a quiet trail for tomorrow, and then we're heading home." The courtroom remained silent. After 11 days of testimony, the jury deliberated for 9 hours. Calvin Rusk was convicted of murdering Michael Williams and Lauren Taylor. He received 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. The verdict established legal responsibility, but did not answer every question. Rusk never revealed what he said to persuade the couple to enter his van. He never explained whether he selected them at random or watched them for several days. He never stated what happened inside the barn. He did not identify the exact weapon used against Michael or the method used to restrain Lauren. Investigators believed Rusk may have committed other violent crimes. Authorities reviewed disappearances involving travelers in Tennessee, Kentucky, Missouri, and Arkansas. Several cases contained similarities, but none produced enough evidence for charges. Rusk died in prison in 2022. He never confessed. Michael and Lauren were buried in Alabama in December 2009, before Rusk's trial began. The families chose a joint service. The couple had disappeared together, been buried together, and remained side by side for 13 years. Michael's father placed a small electrical tool inside the casket. It was the first tool he had given his son as a teenager. Melissa placed the unfinished postcard beside Lauren. She did not complete the final sentence. She believed the interruption belonged to her sister's story and should remain untouched. The campground photograph from Mercer Ridge stood near the front of the church. Michael and Lauren appeared relaxed. The explorer was visible behind them. Nothing in the image suggested danger. They looked like 2 people approaching the end of a pleasant vacation. The photograph became more painful after investigators learned Rusk may already have seen them by then. Earl Benton considered selling the Morrow farm. For months, he could not walk behind the barn without thinking about the grave. His wife refused to visit the property. Roscoe continued following Earl during the day, but avoided the excavation site after investigators left. Eventually, Earl demolished the barn. He did not build anything over the burial area. He planted 2 cedar trees, several yards apart, and placed a plain stone between them. The families asked that the location remain private. They did not want the farm to become a destination for strangers interested in the crime. The stone contains no description of the murders. It carries only 2 names: Michael Williams, Lauren Taylor. Below them are the words, "They were going home." The investigation failed in 1996 because every important fact remained incomplete. A green van had been seen near the campground, but no witness saw the couple enter it. Calvin Rusk was present in the region, but he denied meeting them. His girlfriend supported his alibi. The Morrow farm was connected to him, but no evidence justified excavating private property. The couple's belongings suggested abduction, but the campsite showed no violence. The van was destroyed before it could be examined with improved forensic methods. The grave solved those problems simultaneously. The bodies established murder. The location connected the crime to Rusk. The camera linked the couple to his van. The blood inside the barn showed where the attack occurred. Darlene's new testimony destroyed his alibi. The cigarette filter, concrete purchase, clothing buttons, and bracelet created a chain no single item could provide alone. Roscoe did not solve the case by uncovering one magical piece of evidence. He uncovered the place where all the evidence had been waiting together. Michael and Lauren were cautious travelers. They had maps, tools, and established plans. They did not enter a remote forest without supplies. They did not deliberately vanish. Their mistake may have been trusting a local man who appeared to know the area. Rusk understood how visitors viewed people like him. A work shirt, an old van, and familiarity with the roads could make him appear helpful. He may have claimed there was a sunrise overlooked tourists never found. He may have said a trail was closed and offered an alternative. He may have pretended Michael's Explorer had a mechanical problem. Whatever story he used, it needed to sound reasonable for only a few minutes. The couple left their wallets because they were not shopping. They left their jackets because they were not expecting to stay out. They left their water because the destination was supposedly close. Lauren took her camera because she believed there would be something worth photographing. That camera ultimately helped convict the man who killed her. The last recoverable photograph was never released publicly in full. The families requested that only cropped versions be used at trial. Melissa saw the original once. She described Michael's expression as uncertain rather than frightened. He appeared to be looking past the camera, possibly toward the driver. The photograph was tilted. Lauren may have taken it accidentally while lowering the camera. The green wall of the van filled part of the frame. The white primer patch appeared through a window. There was no visible weapon, no sign of struggle. The image captured a moment before the couple fully understood their danger. That made it harder for Melissa to view. Michael and Lauren were still together. Michael was still alive. Lauren still held the camera. They may have believed they were only traveling down an unfamiliar road. The photograph showed the last moment in which the situation may have seemed reversible. The discovery ended the uncertainty that had tormented the families. It did not provide comfort in the way outsiders often imagined. For 13 years, Michael's parents had allowed themselves to believe he might walk through the door. Melissa sometimes examined faces in airports and grocery stores, looking for Lauren. The absence of bodies left space for impossible hope. The grave removed that space. It proved the couple had died during the first night of the disappearance. Every search conducted afterward had been for people who were already buried. Every birthday, anniversary, and holiday had passed, while Rusk continued moving from state to state. The conviction brought accountability, but not time. Michael and Lauren did not have children who could preserve their stories. Their families became responsible for keeping them from being remembered only as victims. They spoke about Michael's patience, Lauren's postcards, their camping trips, and the house they had planned to renovate. The crime had taken the future. The families refused to let it take the past. Michael Williams and Lauren Taylor traveled from Alabama to Tennessee because they wanted several quiet days away from work, medical appointments, and expectations. They selected a small campground because it seemed safe. They ate at a local diner. They planned one final morning hike. Lauren began a postcard because the vacation was nearing its end. Then Calvin Rusk entered their path. He saw two travelers who did not know the area. He used the appearance of helpfulness to move them away from the campground. He took them to a property where no one lived and where he knew the buildings, roads, and ground. He murdered them and buried them behind a barn. Then he returned to town and denied ever seeing them. For 13 years, the Morrow farm changed owners, collected debris, and disappeared beneath weeds. The grave remained shallow but undisturbed. Investigators had once stood near the property without knowing what was behind the barn. Rusk believed time had protected him. It had only delayed the moment when the soil would move. On October 8, 2009, Roscoe began digging because he smelled something beneath the ground. He did not understand that two families had spent 13 years waiting for that earth to open. He did not know the blue fabric belonged to Lauren's jacket. He did not know the bone beside it belonged to a woman whose final postcard promised she was coming home. The dog simply refused to stop digging, and beneath a few feet of Tennessee soil, the secret Calvin Rusk had trusted for 13 years finally came into the light. Lauren had written that the woods seemed to go on forever. For her family, the search felt the same way. But it did not end in the forest. It ended behind an abandoned barn, where Michael and Lauren were found together, still far from Alabama, but no longer missing.